There is a moment nobody warns you about. You do the work, years of it, meditating, reading, journaling, attending retreats. You peel back the layers of yourself with a devotion most people never bother with, and then it happens. A shift, a clearing, something that can only be called an awakening, a sudden stillness where the inner noise goes quiet and everything briefly makes sense. You expect that moment to ignite you. You expect fire, momentum, a life finally launched. Instead, the fire goes out entirely. What follows is a strange, hollow silence that no one ever told you was coming. It settles over everything without warning or explanation. Most people who reach that silence assume they have broken something. They have not. They have walked into a documented psychological passage. This is one of the most documented yet least understood passages in all of human psychology. Carl Jung spent decades mapping it. Jung began his career observing a disturbing pattern. People doing everything right, ambitious, disciplined, and successful, found the summit completely empty. Not temporarily flat, not needing a holiday, but genuinely hollow. As though something essential had been quietly removed without awareness or consent. He called this the midlife crisis, but that phrase understates his meaning. He was not describing men purchasing sports cars, something deeper. He was describing a fundamental collision between the life a person constructs for the world and the life their deeper self insists upon. What he noticed in people who had undergone spiritual experiences was even more striking. The very practice meant to bring peace dismantled their drive. He called it the awakening paradox, the moment when clarity becomes confusion, when what you worked so hard to reach empties you out entirely. The reason it happens comes down to what Jung called the persona. From early in life, most people build a carefully assembled version of themselves. A mask worn in exchange for approval, belonging, safety, and status. Career ambitions, relationship goals, hunger for recognition all live inside that mask. The persona is not malicious. It is genuinely necessary for navigating the world. Problems begin only when we forget the mask is there. For years, sometimes decades, the persona drives a person's life. It tells them what to want, what to chase, what counts as success. It runs on a very specific fuel, the unexamined anxiety about whether we are, at the core, enough. That question powers everything beneath the surface. Awakening happens, and in one disorienting flash, the whole mechanism becomes visible. The career goals rooted in fear of inadequacy suddenly seen. The relationship chasing driven by a need to feel worthy. The entire architecture of ambition powered, not by genuine desire but by the need to escape. Once seen, it cannot be unseen. The mechanism is permanently visible. The persona's hidden architecture revealed in one devastating moment of clarity. Jung reached for medieval alchemy to describe what happens next. He called it the nigredo, a Latin term meaning blackening, the stage of complete breakdown. The alchemical stage requires raw material to be completely broken down before it can be purified into something new. As metaphor, it is exact. Before something authentic can emerge, the inauthentic has to die first, and that death is as uncomfortable as it sounds. There is no shortcut available. Tragedy is most people lack a framework for this. Spiritual traditions promise awakening, leads to bliss, which is not wrong, but incomplete. They omit the detail that you must walk through a valley of complete purposelessness to get there. The valley is not mentioned anywhere. When people arrive at that valley, they panic. They reach back for old goals and find the hunger is gone. Nothing sticks anymore. They try to manufacture new ones and find nothing sticks. They wonder if something is medically wrong with them. The fear compounds the emptiness. Jung saw this repeatedly. His message was always the same. Do not run from the emptiness. You are not stuck. You are in the chrysalis. He documented a pattern that appeared so often across different patients. It became a template for understanding what happens when awakening meets ambition. Imagine someone who spent 15 years building a career they believed in. Late nights, real sacrifices, doubt pushed through, failure absorbed, inner voice overruled. They get results. By any external standard, they succeed. And then something breaks the surface. A meditation retreat, a health crisis, a quiet Tuesday morning. And in that moment, they see what drove them all along. Not passion, not purpose, fear, fear of failure, fear of not meeting expectations, fear of becoming who they spent childhood escaping, fear that if they stopped achieving, there was nothing underneath worth caring about at all. When that fear is clearly seen, the ambition collapses. not because the work lacked value or the career was wrong, but the fuel was false. Jung called this purpose poisoning. He believed it was one of the most widespread and least acknowledged forms of suffering in modern life everywhere. We chase what we believe we want when what we actually want is to feel safe, seen, and whole. When understood, the chase loses meaning. Here Jung insisted on something important. This is not a tragedy. It is a liberation, even when it does not feel like one. Because underneath the fear-driven motivation, underneath the persona, constructed goals, there is something else, quieter, slower, and completely different in character. Jung called it the self, capital S, not the ego, not the persona, not the social identity assembled since childhood. The deeper, authentic core. Part that existed before the world started telling you who to be. The self is not constructed. It precedes construction. It simply is. The self has its own desires. They do not push or pressure. They do not carry the grinding, anxious quality of ego-driven ambition. They feel more like a pull, a gentle current you can choose to step into. The person running on fear for 15 years discovers this. They discover they genuinely love mentoring others, not for reputation, not for advancement, but because something in them lights up watching someone grow. That is a soul-driven desire. It does not need justification. It simply is. But it cannot be heard while ego-driven noise runs at full volume. Signal requires silence to come through. This is why awakening dismantles old motivation before the new kind can emerge. It is clearing. It is not punishment, it is clearing. Jung insisted on that distinction. The void is not an ending. It is preparation. Something is being readied. Jung called it conscious waiting. Not passive waiting, but active, intentional engagement with the void as a meaningful phase of transformation in itself. Conscious waiting does not mean doing nothing. It means doing something very specific, sitting in discomfort without immediately filling it. Staying present with emptiness means asking the right questions, then staying still long enough to hear the answers. The stillness is not passive. The stillness is the method. It means treating the emptiness not as a problem to solve, but as space already pregnant with what comes next. This reframe changes everything. Jung developed 3 practices for moving through this phase. He returned to them consistently with patient after patient. The first he called sacred grieving. Before moving forward, a person must give themselves genuine permission to grieve what is being left behind. Even fear-driven ambitions gave you something real. They gave you structure, identity, direction, a story about who you are each morning when you wake. Losing that is a genuinely real loss, and it deserves to be acknowledged as one. Jung had patients write letters to their old desires, recognizing what those desires had given and protected. Letters that recognized what those desires had provided, what they had protected against, and why they no longer fit. What seemed ceremonial accelerated psychological release. When something is honored consciously, it does not need to be held onto unconsciously. The letter practice releases what suppression would preserve indefinitely. Try it yourself. Find one goal you have carried that no longer feels true. Write it a letter. Thank it for what it gave. Name honestly what it was really trying to do for you. Then release it clearly. The clarity of that release determines the completeness of freedom. Second practice Jung called active imagination, not visualization and not meditation in the traditional sense. It is deliberate dialogue with the unconscious self. You become still, you set an intention, then you listen. Not for logical thoughts or plans, but for images, impulses, feelings, and idea fragments. His instructions were simple. Sit quietly, ask one question, then wait for whatever comes without forcing or judging or asking whether it makes practical sense. The question he recommended, what wants to be born through me? Not what should I do, not what earns respect. Just that one question. Write down whatever surfaces, without judging it, without editing it, without asking whether it makes practical sense. Simply receive it and record it. The results Jung documented from this practice were frequently surprising. A corporate attorney who kept seeing images of herself building furniture with her hands. Retired soldier repeatedly drawn to painting. A technology executive who uncovered a deep hunger to teach mathematics to children in underserved communities somewhere. None of these made immediate rational sense, but all of them, when followed with curiosity rather than judgment, led somewhere genuinely true, somewhere real. Third practice Jung called symbolic living. This one is harder to describe, but may be the most powerful of all three practices. Symbolic living means reorganizing your choices around what genuinely calls to you, rather than what strategically advances you. Fascination over obligation. Choosing resonance over resume. Treating what makes you feel more alive as meaningful information about who you actually are. This is the compass pointing home. Jung was not suggesting you quit your job and vanish into mountains. He was suggesting you orient your choices, even small daily ones, differently. One that points toward authentic expression rather than external validation. People who began practicing symbolic living reported the first stirrings of new motivation returning. Not hot and bright, like the ego-driven drive of before, steadier. Something coming from inside rather than from fear of what stopping would reveal. New motivation feels completely different. Worth knowing what to look for when it arrives, because many people miss it entirely at first. Ego motivation has a specific texture, urgent, pressured. There is always the sense that you need to get somewhere before time runs out. It lives in the head as a constant hum of planning and calculation, and in the body as tension in the chest and shoulders. And it is deeply conditional. It requires constant external reinforcement to sustain. If no one is watching, if applause stops, ego motivation flickers out. Soul motivation feels nothing like this. It is calm, patient. There is no urgency, no demand that you do anything right. This second, it is less a push than a pull. You feel it as warmth rather than tension, as spacious openness in the chest rather than anxiety. And it does not require external validation to sustain itself. You are energized by the activity itself, not by what others think of it. Jung documented patience, describing this motivation in terms like, "I do not feel like I am working. I feel like I am remembering something." Or, "When I am doing this, I am not trying to accomplish anything. I am simply expressing what I am," expression over achievement entirely. The quality of expression, rather than achievement, is one of the most reliable signals that you have found something soul-driven. The second signal is sustainability. Ego motivation depletes you, even when it is working, even when you are winning, because it is always managing anxiety beneath the surface. Soul motivation generates energy. You come away from the work feeling more alive than when you started. That is rare but becomes ordinary in time. Soul motivation also does not run on a fixed schedule. It comes in waves, periods of intense engagement, followed by periods of quiet gestation. Trying to force it onto a fixed timetable is like telling the ocean when to have waves. The rhythm is its own. It resists scheduling. This is why people who emerge from spiritual emptiness describe life afterward as less something they are doing and more something happening through them. They still show up, they still work, make choices, still plan. But there is flow and rightness that was never present when fear ran everything. The emptiness you sit in right now is not the absence of meaning. It is the beginning, the real version, the kind that endures. The kind that does not collapse because it was never built on anything fragile. Jung spent his entire career studying the human psyche at depth, and his consistent conclusion, the people who suffered most were not those with the darkest experiences. They were the ones who refused to learn. The people who came through the void, who allowed the old self to dissolve without panicking, who waited long enough to hear the quieter voice. Those people consistently reported something remarkable waiting for them on the other side. Not just peace, not just clarity, something more stable and more real. Not just peace but purpose, not just clarity but unshakable alignment between who they were and how they lived. That was always the true seeking. That is available to you, not in spite of the emptiness, because of it. The void is not the obstacle to meaning. It is it. Here is your assignment from Jung's framework. Starting today, spend 10 minutes each morning, writing one question. What wants to be born through me? Do not try to answer it. Just ask and write whatever comes. No editing, no judging, no asking whether it makes practical sense. Simply receive. Do that for 30 days, noticing what keeps appearing. Jung believed authentic life is not figured out. It is something you listen your way into. And that process begins exactly where you are now, in the void, in the quiet, in the space where the old self has let go. Trust the process. The chrysalis always looks like nothing is happening, but something is. Something is always happening in the dark where you cannot see. If this resonated, leave a comment below with one word describing where you are in this process right now. That single word might surprise you. And if you know someone in that post-awakening emptiness, wondering what went wrong, share this with them. It might be exactly what they need.